In November 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. received a mail from the FBI. It was a suicide mail threatening to release audio recordings of his alleged sexual misconduct activities if he didn't kill himself. Now, as shocking as this may sound, this is just one of dozens of activities that were carried out by the FBI between 1956 to 1971 under a covert illegal psychological operation known as COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO is short for Counterintelligence Program. Now, this went on for the span of years that I just mentioned, and a lot of people knew about it, just kept going on and on and on. They caused a ton of problems. The person who was convicted of killing Martin Luther King Jr. recounted his testimony actually because, well, he did not believe that he was actually the one that did it. That's what he said. And we all know there were just so many conspiracies around that. Now, my aim in this episode is to show you how the truth can hide behind the way things are framed. I started with this story just to enlighten you to how people can actually go to great lengths to frame things. One of the primary purposes of the COINTELPRO program was to ensure that the public believed certain things about certain people. In fact, one of their main aims was to undermine the operations of civil societies, social groups, and political groups that did not align with what they termed to be their national agenda. And this happened expertly. They recruited storytellers, comic book artists, movie makers, and all sorts of people to frame things in a particular way to ensure that the public believed a thing. Now, this happened successfully because of a cognitive bias known as the framing effect. The framing effect is the tendency for people to believe a story because of the way it is presented or framed. So something may not actually be true, but because of the way it is presented, you will just believe that somehow, some way, this is true. A few days ago, I watched a clip on Instagram posted by CNN in which they said that President Trump had just created another monument to slam his name against, just the same way he made his money by slamming his name against buildings. Now, that presentation, that framing makes you think that he's just some egotistical person who just cares about slamming his name. However, he made his money through actual honest work in real estate and a lot of other investments, not through slamming his name. It was after making money that he slammed his name, not even slammed his name, inscribed his name, which is right. It's not against the law. And so they went on in that particular clip to say that he went against the norm. Now, they didn't just say he went against the norm, they said he violated the norm. When the average person hears the word violated, you think something wrong has happened. However, what they said he violated was the norm, not the law. They said, though it was legal, so the particular news piece was talking about some new archway that he's building somewhere in the US. Now, though it's legal to do what he's doing, the way they presented the information was as though it's some illegal, very bad thing he's doing, simply because they're trying to frame it in a particular way to make you believe certain things about the person. Now, I don't really care about the politics of this issue. I just wanted to explain to you how framing things in a particular way can make you think and feel a certain way about people. It's one of the tools that poets use. You'd often find that the words poets use in their poetry, that's if you're someone who reads poetry, are remarkably different from what you would find in everyday language. And it's on purpose. It's not because they don't know regular words or they don't like regular words. It's because they're trying to evoke certain feelings, certain expressions from the reader or listener. Even spoken word artists, same thing. They try to use certain mannerisms and certain words in specific ways to ensure that their audience feels it in a way that they intend. Now, this framing effect I'm talking about is not just something that is used by individuals. Like I said in the earlier example, it's used by organizations and especially covert organizations. So just in case you think the FBI is the only culprit, every nation has a team of people who does something like that. Just take it from me. A team of people whose main job is to frame stories in a particular way for the purpose of advancing the country's agenda. Now, I actually think it's a good thing. Whether it's done illegally or legally is not really my bone of contention. It's just that the fact that you know that there is a way in which you want your country to advance and you want to uphold the interests of your nation and its citizens. And so you've decided that you're going to frame things in a particular way to ensure that this is achieved. I think it's fair, really, because I mean, would you rather allow some other person frame your story for you? So the best story is the story that is told by the actual author. So you need to tell your stories yourself. And the framing effect is one thing that is used by, like I've said, covert operatives to ensure that things happen in a particular way. Now, the bit about, going to actually cause harm and kill people, that's actually not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the expert use of language, communication, and messaging devices to ensure that something is believed about what you're trying to say. Now, this did not end, obviously, when the COINTELPRO was disbanded in 1971 till today. Everywhere, this thing still happens. In fact, a lot of the social media platforms that we use are simply channels for government organizations to get data. A lot of the time, and this information is everywhere on the internet. You can just research it. A lot of the time, social media founders like Mark Zuckerberg have admitted to doing certain things a certain way because of government pressures. So once Donald Trump took over, we started to notice that Meta platforms reduced the way they were pushing LGBTQ content and things like that, simply because the previous administration that had forced them to do certain things, had changed. And so they had to now change their rhetoric as well to please this particular administration. Things like that happen all the time. Things are always framed to suit the narrative of whoever is in power. So it's in your own interest to know how to frame things for your own purposes. Now, every single country has like committees of public information. What committees like that do is, first off, they're made up of filmmakers, usually made up of filmmakers, entertainers, or at least entertainment consultants, people from the whatever law enforcement agencies involved in investigations and intelligence, and then neuroscientists like myself usually make up teams like this. Their main purpose: know what's going on, see where there's maybe an groundswell of information gathering, and then track these things, direct them in the path that you want them to go, and ensure that every single person believes this rhetoric and believes this story. And it works quite expertly in most cases. You see that we're able to push certain narratives and people believe that this is actually the truth about this thing. Sometimes you don't even need so much detail. You just have to switch some adjectives and you've been able to transform something so remarkably. It's the beauty of the framing effect. There's just so much you can do with adjectives. And I'm going to say that just before I close, I'm going to give you a tip on how to use adjectives very wisely to your own advantage. But before we get there, I want to talk about how the framing effect can, lock you in a mindset, a sort of filter bubble that stops you from thinking for yourself. Now, algorithms on social media platforms do this in a very expert way. What they do is they present certain information to you. Now, whether or not you've chosen your preferences, you're just setting up your account. You've not chosen any preferences. They just present certain kind of information to you based on their assessment of people in your locality, so they say. But if that's the case, how did they present information to the first set of people in your locality? So anyway, they present a certain set of information to you, and then you begin to interact with it. Now, even if you don't like that kind of content, you find yourself just watching it longer and longer each day. What happens is that reinforces the bias behind that particular kind of content, and it sends a signal to them that you like this kind of content, and then they keep giving you that kind of content over and over again. Now, if they want to expand the loop by a bit, they'll just introduce something new that they want to maybe distract you by or teach you about. And when that thing is introduced, it usually would not be introduced in small amounts. You just keep swiping and seeing it in every maybe 4 to 7 videos, maybe like an interval like that. You swipe, 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 you see something like that, swipe, 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 see something like that, and then they just intersperse it with some ads. They're doing that to ensure you're seeing it and you start forming an opinion, whether or not you had one prior. And then at some point, you finally just see something that will catch your attention. You pause, check the comments, and then starts to form an opinion, even though you don't have enough information because you've only seen it on that platform. You've actually just not done any research elsewhere. And that's how these things happen. Next thing, you find yourself in a filter bubble, an echo chamber where you're recycling the same type of information and you just get stuck there. And next thing you know, you start believing a particular kind of thing. Maybe you get polarized to a certain direction without thoughts that or rather with thoughts that don't even belong to you. That's how crazy and I must say cool that that the framing effect is. So the framing effect is used in multiple sectors and it cuts across languages. So it's not just even for communication through words. You can also use the framing effect, if you're trying to expand the concept. You can use it in behavioral patterns as well. You want people to believe a certain thing, and so in movies there is a particular way in which a particular maybe set of people are framed, so you believe that this is who they are, this is what they are like, and these are the kind of things they want to interact with. Things like that just generally are ways in which they push us in a particular direction. And by they, I mean anybody in power, as always. Whoever just has enough power and the means to exert some kind of influence will do it using the framing effects. Now, just in case you think your government is not smart enough to know the things I'm saying, think again. They actually are way smarter than this. They know exactly how to use these devices. They've been doing it since, and they will not stop anytime soon, because in order to maintain some sense or some type of direction in any nation, you need tools like this. Every nation does this thing to push citizens to, sort of play in a particular pen and just allow them to interact there, see them doing things in that direction, give them a limit, let them not go further than that. It's actually so cool in my opinion, because I like the concepts that you can control a large number of people using not even complicated things, just very basic things, and people just sway in a particular direction that you want them to. When you want them distracted, you flood the internet with a particular kind of content, or you make a particular move, some policy comes up just at the right time when you want to make a decision, that is meant to be in the open, legally. And so there's no way you can hide it, but you can distract people long enough so you make that decision without them, ever being aware. It's beautiful the way this framing effect is. So what's the hope for you? I don't want to talk about how you can neutralize the framing effect in this video. I covered that in my master classes. But what I want to tell you is how you can use the framing effect to your advantage. I'll give you one simple trick that I use all the time. Use adjectival clauses rather than generic adjectives. And I'm going to explain what that is. So adjectival clauses are dependent clauses that describe nouns or pronouns. So on their own, they don't really make much sense. But when you put them inside of a sentence, they make sense. If you use them on their own, they are beautiful. But the best way to use them for the framing effect is to use an adjectival clause plus a superlative, or rather an adjective in its superlative form. Let me just give an example. Say so my opinion is that Ronaldo is the best player to ever walk the earth. If I say that just like that, you'll be arguing with me, saying so many things, and it just sounds like I'm just saying something. If I rephrase that sentence and rather said, Ronaldo, who is the first and only player to ever score over 900 goals in his professional career, is the best player. What I've done is that from that part of the sentence that I said, who is the best, and I mentioned a few things, that's the adjectival clause. I now added it to a superlative adjective, which is best. Putting those two things together has made a much more powerful and convincing statement. What I have done to your mind without you knowing is that I have used a false equivalence fallacy and, equated the fact that he has scored over 900 goals, the only player to do that, putting him in an exclusive zone, to the fact that he's the best. However, what truly is the marker for best player? I didn't say that. All I did was give you my own terms in a very, very insidious way and present the sentence to you. Much more convincing and better for framing my opinion as something you should adopt. So that's the gift I'm giving you in this episode. Try doing it with different scenarios and just do more research on adjectival clauses and different ways in which you can string them together in sentences, and you'll find yourself being more convincing in conversations every time you speak, especially when you're trying to posit an opinion that you know may be a bit volatile or controversial. You want to use adjectival clauses in conjunction with adjectives in their superlative form. Maybe not even always in their superlative forms, but always add an adjectival clause to a generic adjective. Like, that combination is powerful. Thank you so much for your time. Until next time.